Well, continuing our coverage now of the looming voice vote, and of course the theme that we have here at the Aussie Wire of ordinary people choosing to step up and try and make a difference. It's part of our philosophy, our beliefs of truth, freedom, and hope so often coming from taking some level of action. I want to introduce you to someone that I've now known for many years, and I'm very glad to call a friend. I've interviewed her before as Topher on my other social media channels, but this is her first time on the Aussie Wire, and I'd like to welcome Mayor Tesa. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Topher.
Now, Mayor, before we get to the issue of the moment, which is the voice campaign, the vote is only literally a matter of days away. It's on Saturday. Before we get to that, I'd like people to understand a little bit. I find you a fascinating person, an inspiring person. You literally just decided one day that you'd had enough and you wanted to do something about it. And you threw your hat in the ring politically. You've copped some hits since then. There's no sugarcoating it. You've invested an enormous amount of energy, an enormous amount of your own money into campaigns, and in some senses with not much to show for it. The cynic could look at you and go, oh, well, you've got nothing to show for all of what you've done. And yet you are soldiering on, and I would argue that the cynic would be wrong. You've got an enormous amount to show for it. But where do you sit with this? What got you into this, and where do you feel you're at the moment?
I think it was a lack of trust and a lack of transparency, and also just watching the community around me shrink, get divided, and looking for answers and not having any leadership. One thing this journey has really taught me is the country is crying out for true leadership. It's crying out for accountability, and it's crying out for truth. That's the biggest thing, truth. And, it's really interesting that we use that word because, again, it's been used so much by the yes camp, truth. But that is exactly it. They know that's what their constituents want. It's what I wanted. And I didn't trust anyone anymore. I could only trust myself to find that out and be an honest voice. I don't need anything. I've worked my way up. Me and my husband worked our way up from nothing. I was born in the middle of a civil war. I've seen atrocities. My heart is with my community. My heart is with all communities. And for me, we need to get true representation, honest representation, representation that says, I don't want to be here, but I have to because no one else is going to do it.
So coming to the yes, no, the voice debate, etc., there are people who would argue that the voice is designed to do exactly that. It's designed to be the voice of a particular community. You are opposed, though, to the voice. Why is that? That could be argued that that's a contradiction there.
A lot of people don't know how to take me. They think that because I'm a vegan, I come from the left. But because I, really believe in not a full capitalist society, but a capitalist society. Nevertheless, that I'm right wing. I'm not. I'm centered. All my opinions come from my own. So one of the very first things I did when The Voice came out was read the report, 276 pages, lots of pretty artwork. And I went, okay, now let me read it again with what would I want to know about it. So going in there with the actual mind going, okay, these are the answers that I wanted. And there was no answers in there. There was nothing that gave me the trust, the truth of what this voice body would be. Now, had they have said, hey, we're going to legislate it, I would have gone, yeah, not a problem. Because legislation is different to putting it into our constitution. Our constitution is our governing body. Our governing document. All laws go back to that document. We've seen the failures within the Aboriginal communities. We've seen the needs. We've seen what's coming out of Alice Springs. What we're doing right now isn't working. And yes, we need to do something different. But how do we know the next thing's not going to work either? We need to make sure that before we put it into our constitution and say, hey, this particular race, the Aboriginal people, will make sure they have to have representation, make sure that they have to have their say in whatever, because that's exactly what the final report says. Even on page 16, I believe, under the title scope, it has a dot point in there that says they can make representations to non-government entities, including business and corporate. So they're not telling the truth. And so why would we put a lie into the Constitution? And on top of that, a lie that divides us by race. It's horrible. I was born in Lebanon. Lebanon had the civil war, and after that, everyone wanted to make sure that it would not happen again. So what did they do? They put in a voice type um, installment into their constitution based on religion, not race. You can't get anything done in Lebanon. Their bureaucracy in Lebanon is ridiculous. The only way you get something done is not because of what you know, it's who you know.
Sure.
I've seen it, and it's the people that suffer on the ground. It has not made a single difference to our lives. So why would I want to bring that to my home in Australia?
Now, before we get to what you're doing on the ground right now, which is what I want to finish with, and I do want to talk about that, but I kind of want to rewind a little bit. When in answering my question about sort of what got you active, you talked about the loss of trust and the sense that you weren't being told the truth, etc. And obviously, you've now mentioned your background, your childhood, and where you've come from. But was there a period in between those two where you did have trust? I mean, there are a lot of people who just believe what they're told. A politician speaks up and they say, well, or a bureaucrat speaks up and they say, well, they must be telling me the truth. The government wouldn't lie to me. Can you relate to that? Did you have a period in your life where you felt that way and you've changed since then, or have you always had that skeptical thread?
I've always been skeptical.
Okay.
Because I saw the trauma when I was little. And I used to wonder, why was that happening? Why were children dying in school buses? Why were people opening the door to get shopping and being blown up? Why? These people were mothers and fathers, aunties, uncles, sisters, brothers. They were somebody's family. And for no reason they died. So for me, coming into this world, it was very, very, very important to know the truth, because how can I help people without it? And that's all I wanted to do. After that trauma in my life just made me want to help and make a difference. That's all I knew, is that it will never happen again. And I'll tell you actually a really interesting story. I was telling a school mum the other day, when my children were little, so up until about 4 years old, every birthday we used to do a birthday give, and I'd take them down to the city, and the give was they'd get to, buy lunch for a homeless person. We'd sit down and talk with them. Anyone they picked, they could pick anyone, and sometimes they picked lots, and sometimes, I'd have to tone it down, say, we've got to go. But my second son, third child, Mark, he would have been about 3 years old, and he saw two Aboriginal men sleeping in boxes in between two buildings. And we were just going for a meeting that day. It wasn't actually his birthday. And I saw them out of the corner of my eye, and he saw them, and he goes, "Mummy." I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Why are those daddies sleeping in boxes?" He didn't see them as homeless people. He saw them as someone's parent, a father figure, because, that's
grown men.
Older men were father figures. Exactly. And I went, "Yep, you're right, mate. We'll go get them something." And then when we went did our quick meeting, got the food. By the time I came back, the police were putting on the rubber gloves, getting ready to move them on. And my son looked at the police, and he looked at me, and I just went, "Boys, I'm really sorry. You're going to have to move out the way. We're feeding. It's lunchtime." And he sat down, and they ate their lunch because it was hot. And the police just stood there. And I said, "No one's to interrupt them. I'm sorry." And he asked them all these questions. And so for us, it's always been natural. It comes through, my genetics, it comes through my grandfather, God bless his soul, that we really are just a family that just wants to make sure that we give back.
Now, that's been my experience with you. I mentioned in the intro, I've known you now for a number of years. I think you're quite an incredible human being. So all of what you've said checks out. All of what you've said is consistent with what I know you to be. So tell me about what you're doing now in terms of supporting the No campaign. We understand a little bit about why you've chosen that side of the campaign. But in practical terms, what can someone actually do?
In practical terms, we need people on the ground. That's what we need to do. I had a conversation this morning with a mum from the school, and she said to me, "Oh, Maya, I don't know anything about this voice referendum on Saturday." She goes, "I don't know anything." She goes, I've tried to look, I can't find anything." She goes, "But I don't want to be a racist and vote no."
Yeah.
She goes, "Can you help me?"
Yeah, wow.
And I explained to her the exact story that I just told you guys, about the Lebanese constitution, about the constitution being our governing document, yada, yada. And she went, "Why would anyone vote for that?" I said exactly right. So
Mm.
if you guys want to help, we really need boots on the ground. And Fair Australia are still taking volunteers. You can register with them. It comes straight through to our electorates, whichever ones are, and because it's not a Liberal Labor thing. It doesn't
Sure.
matter how much they're trying to put it that way. It's not. We have good people from all sides of politics saying, hey, we want to make sure that this country stays on track of being united.
Mm.
Because 10 years ago, 20 years ago, yes, there were still problems in Aboriginal communities. There were problems in most vulnerable communities, which include our inner metro communities. I mean, go and see the homeless problem there.
Mm-hmm.
But we were united. We knew if someone was going to be racist and we called them out on it.
Mm.
Right now, we can't. We can't even open our mouths because we will get attacked. Everyone has been put under an umbrella and we have to stop the division.
Mm.
So go on to, I believe it is, just bear with me, I'll confirm it because I don't want to get it wrong, australiafair.com.au.
Australiafair.com.au.
And
We'll put that in the description of the video.
yeah,
Well, Maya, thank you so much for this interview. Thank you so much for all the work that you do. I look forward to keeping in touch with you and keeping tabs on where you go next and what you do next. I have a sneaking suspicion that one day I'll be introducing you as Mayor Tesa MP or MLC, whatever the case may be. We're not there yet, but I look forward to following your story and your journey. And thank you so much for joining us today on the Aussie Wire.
no, thank you very much for having me, Topher.